Welcome to the iNetrepreneur Radio Show. We are so honored to bring you your host, the ultimate celebritypreneur, connecting businesses and celebrities worldwide. Winner of the Networking Organization of the Year, best-selling author, magazine publisher, trainer, and owner and founder of Network Together and the iNetrepreneur Media Network from magazines, TV, and radio network. We're excited to bring you your host, Mr. Robert W. Jones.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. I'm glad that you're with us here from 2:30 to 3:30 Arizona time, which is also on Pacific time right now. My name is Robert Jones. I am your host of the iNetrepreneur Radio Network. I'm also the iNetrepreneur Network founder. And again, I'm glad that you're sharing this time with us. I just want to go through a few community points. We've had a lot of things going on lately, and we have so much more coming up in the next couple of months. The first one I want to talk about is we had about 2 weeks ago, we had the Unchain Yourself Professional Women's Conference. We had well over 125 women and a few good men there at that event. I just want to thank again the speakers, the panelists, the sponsors, and the staff, and certainly the attendees. But I also want to let everyone know to save the date, because on October 20th, 2022, we're going to have another Unchain Yourself Professional Women's Conference, and this will be virtual. So some of the participants who weren't able to come out in July will be able to come out in October onto the Zoom. I mean, what a great room. You can see anyone in the world pretty much at any time. Also, I have 3 books back here behind me. One is the original Art of Connection book. It was 365 Days of Networking Quotes. We had 122 first-time authors participate in that book out of the 365 days of the year. I've always been so excited about that. It's a great place to start your journey in publishing. I also have our second book, the Art of Connection book. You can see the both should have badges, but I have this one with a badge. That means we were #1 in a category. Actually, we ended up being #1 in 29 different categories for the second book, 365 Days of Inspirational Quotes. And my good friend, I have a book in between, Linda Carmine, 1% More. I'm looking to get the book with the best-selling label on there as well. I wrote the foreword, and I wrote a chapter with that book. And I cannot impress upon the power of publishing any more than just the last 2 years. It opens up so much doors. It gives you a trust factor. It gives you the credibility. It creates exposure. It also helps if you're influenced. Publishing is, a remarkable way to place yourself as the expert in your field, or even someone like me who's a facilitator and a connector. Again, if you'd like to be a part of our third book, 365 Days of Transformational Quotes, please, get with me, PM me. I have a special code that takes your book page from $550 down to $197. Also, I want to remind everyone, go to NT Events, ntevents.net. You can find networking meetings, academy classes, pop-up events, which we have one coming up here pretty soon, summits, and the industry's first iNet Connect interview panel process, and so much more. Like us on Facebook, subscribe to our magazine, and here it is. It's the Ultrapreneur Premiere. This is a 2-hour virtual event, and my wife says it's 100% guaranteed to turn entrepreneurs into ultrapreneurs. At this event, each one is unique and focuses on one or all of the necessary aspects for today's ultrapreneur, and that's speaking, publishing, and scaling your business. So you can go to NT Events, go on August 24th, and you can get yourself registered to be with us. I'm going to be speaking at the event with our own Natalie McQueen. She works with me on the publishing of the Art of Connection series. I'll also be there with Jay Souter. Hey, buddy will like this. He's my guest today. Former professional bowler, MMA artist, strategist and a marketer and scaler, and also Jay Souter. He has world-class speaking academy. So there's a lot coming up. Again, go to ntevents.net. That's ntevents.net. So you can find over 1,000 meetings and events and academies and radio shows and all these other things to your heart's content. I like to say, if you don't find business in the iNetrepreneur Network, you just may be in the wrong business. So without further ado, I'm going to bring the man of the hour here with me, Mr. Buddy Thornton. How are you today, buddy?
I'm doing great, Robert. Really glad to be here.
I am glad that you're here as well. I love that, we met in a special way, and we'll talk a little bit about that in the third segment. But, you and I, maybe it's that military background. Maybe it's just that, living in Texas, maybe it's just how we're built. We're just made that way. But the two of us, we just like to just go out and do it. And one of the ways to go out and do it is just meeting people, isn't it, buddy?
Yeah, if you're not willing to put yourself out there, how's anybody going to find you? I mean, that's plain and simple. It's if you got to be able to walk the walk, and if they can't see you walk the walk, they're not going to even think you're real.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Again, I'm with Buddy Thornton. He is the owner and founder of BCT Mediations Plus. He is an author, a speaker, a mediator, and a social change agent. And I'm really happy that you're here with me today, buddy. But one of the things I do on every show, especially if I haven't had you on my show before, is I have this process that says, when it comes to people, you want to know a person's who and their why before we start getting into their what and their how. Andy, I'd like to start with this. It's just, what was your early life like, buddy? Where did you grow up? What were your parents like? Did you have any brothers and sisters that you fought with or just loved? Just tell us a little bit about the early years of Buddy Thornton.
Well, I grew up in the panhandle of Texas, and I was the youngest of three. I was born premature, so I was very small, and it was good that I did have an older brother and sister because they kind of buffered me away from all the bullying and problems, except when they decided to bully me. And as I was approaching my adolescent years, my parents fostered my oldest brother in, and so I ended up with two older brothers and an older sister. But I always was small until I was in my mid-teens. And so I didn't get involved in a lot of external activities, and I wanted to do something. And I was very good in school. So I pivoted to wanting to learn how to speak. I had seen other people speak. I was always amazed when I saw people on stage. I thought, wow, that would be great to get in front of an audience. And it never occurred to me that there might be a real long process involved in that. So at the age of 11, my parents got me a speech coach who actually ran speech contests in the panhandle of Texas. And his name was Dr. Kadingo. He was a podiatrist, but he, mentored all the kids who wanted to be speakers in the area. And from the age of 11 until 16, he was my coach. And I was able to speak on multiple stages, Rotary Club, Optimist Club, Key Club International. I was able to go a lot of places. And he was a pretty good mentor because when I was 15, I made it all the way to the finals of the state of Texas for one of the contests and did very well. And since then, that's been my focus. I did have a growth spurt in my mid-teen years, so I did pivot into some sporting activities, but that wasn't really my focus. My focus there was to be social and to be around people. The speaking and being engaging was probably my number one thing that I remember from my childhood.
Kind of, I always like to look at, brothers and sisters, parents, how you grow up, is in certain ways how you get shaped. I have this idea that there's nature, nurture, and then your noodle. Your noodle, can trump anything because that's the capacity of the most powerful processor in the world. But, what are some of the things that you remember in the nurturing aspect, aside from your mentor, about growing up in the panhandle of Texas? Because quite frankly, buddy, especially when you're talking about, a few decades, there isn't a big population base in Texas, but there's still a great personal space where people, even though it was sparsely populated, they still knew each other, in that areas, didn't they?
Well, I did grow up in a small town. I was born in Amarillo, which is actually a fairly sizey city, but I grew up in a very small town, and we knew the first names of all the police officers. And of course, you could count them on one hand. And if you got into trouble, or if you even thought you had a problem, where I grew up, you could walk up to the door of any house in your neighborhood and knock on the door, and whoever answered the door, you say, "Hey, I got this guy's chasing me," or "This guy, I think this guy is meaning to do harm," and they would take you in, and they would call your parents, and they would call the authorities. So the entire community was part of my education. We had a saying, a lot of people say
Yep.
it takes a village to raise a child. No, it takes a village to maintain a village. That's what it takes, because everybody is everybody's child. And that's the way I grew up. And I didn't even understand until I left the panhandling and I was an adult. I didn't understand how awkward that made me compared to a lot of other people who looked at like there was a ghost behind every post. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm. Yeah, and that's what I really wanted to show a little bit. I grew up in Texas in the 70s and the 80s, and what I loved about growing up in Texas during that time frame is it really felt like everyone what had a very they embraced the community concept. They embraced the neighborhood concept. And I remember the first time I found out that people weren't all like Texans was when actually the first time I went to California. And I remember, someone invited me out to go, meet at a restaurant one time. And I remember going out and no one showed up. And I thought, oh my goodness, there's no one here. Did they cancel it? Well, they just didn't show up. Where I remember if you do the same thing in Texas, you'd invite a few people, you might two or three, and like, 6 or 7 may show up. That's just how it was. I mean, you always, honored your word. And that's how it was back in those days. Don't you agree?
Oh yeah, I have one story about when I was like an adolescent. I was still bullied occasionally from and there was a couple of kids on my block that we had a little bit of a disagreement with, and they chased me home from school one day, and my dad happened to be home on that day, and he saw me running across the lawn heading for the front door, and he stopped and he looked at me and he said, "No son of mine is a chicken," and he made me turn around and face my bullies. And make a long story short, I ended up with a black eye and a little bit of bruising and what have you. And so he's a Texan, right? That night there was an Optimist Club meeting and he was the president.
Yep.
So he dressed me up and he took me down there and he paraded me around. Look, my son faced up to a whole bunch of bullies. He didn't tell them that he pushed me back out the door. So, that you are a product of your upbringing.
Yeah, and I even remember in my upbringing in Texas, they called them licks. I mean, you had corporal punishment in school. You'd have a nurse there, a principal, and a vice principal, and if you stepped out of bounds, they didn't give you a nice little smiley note or a frown or something when you went home, and the parents took care of it. They took care of it right there at school. And those licks would hurt, and it was just such a different way of you know kind of maintaining that community, that village, the school, the people in there, and things have changed so much from those days. But in many ways, it kind of helped shape my internal side. I mean, I don't go around giving licks to kids or anything, buddy. I want to make sure that you know that. But it really was a different time frame, and I learned from that some of these things. But as you grew up, going to high school, I also know you're a service member. Like me, you're a vet. You served your country during the Vietnam time frame, and you were probably my best friend. Anytime that we were out in the field or on a ship, you served as a U.S. Navy hospital corpsman. Tell us a little bit about your time in the service and how has that affected your life?
Well, my parents were never going to be able to afford to send me to school. So I made a decision right after I turned 17 to leave high school and apply to join the Navy. Took my tests, scored very, very high, and I was allowed to go to boot camp. And so I joined at the age of 17, and I was quite young and quite naive. But rather quickly, that kind of gets shook out of you, boot camp and other things. I was lucky, though I did very well, and I went straight to A school from boot camp, and A school is where I became a hospital corpsman. So I want you to imagine this in today's world: a 17-year-old drawing blood, suturing people, and having people's lives in their hands at the age of 17.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we were still in the Vietnam War. It was 1974, and I had to face the reality that at any point in time, the whole world could come to an end or certainly be changed. And you get a different perspective. And because I did it when I was very young, I actually was able to embed it almost as part of my child development. And it was this overwhelming desire to make sure that the people around me were protected and okay. And that framework and that mindset followed me all the way to this day. I met my wife. She was a USO volunteer, and she fed me milk and cookies, and she's been feeding me milk and cookies for 48 years. So I really can't complain about that. And I spent time at Camp Lejeune. I spent time with the Force Troops, 2nd Division Marines. And my time at the Naval Hospital was special, but my time with the Marines was ultra special because they only have one name for corpsmen. They call them Doc, and they call them Doc because they know that when they're in the field, there's only one person who's going to be able to keep them alive if they need them, and that's Doc. And so it didn't matter what I did, where I went. Anytime I ran into a Marine, the first thing they would say is, "We love you, Doc," and they meant it. So fast forward to today. Look, I've got 40 plus years of having this great, huge, extended family. When someone says Semper Fi, I say Semper Fi, and it was an honor. So, that colors your world. And I would never be who I am today without two things. One, my time with the Marines, and two, my wife.
And I love that you say that because there's something, if you've never been a part of it and you hear that saying, and it may sound kind of canned, but you say brother in arms. I mean, it really does have a meaning. I'm getting goosebumps even saying that right now, buddy. Because when you serve and when you've been in combat or when you've been, and I truly mean in a foxhole, or when you even walked guard duty. I was there in the time frame when we were handing the Panama Canal back to the Panamanians. And I had a big wake up call too. I joined the Marines when I was 17, and all of a sudden, they put you on a silver jet, and then you go to boot camp, you go to, your MOS school, and then all of a sudden, you get your first, duty call, and all of a sudden, I went to a place that they didn't like us very much, and I grew up that everyone loved Americans, and we were the best country on earth, and everyone wanted to, be here or be one. And I still remember going down to Panama, and I thought, what happened? No one likes us here. What am I doing? I thought we would be celebrated. I was thinking like, roses would come from the crowd and champagne corks would be coming off the side of the buildings. I mean, I really thought that we were doing something so great and so meaningful. And what I found is, different people who grow up in different areas just have a different set of beliefs in their own realm that they subscribe to. And it really woke me up to seeing what diversity really looked like, not because of religion and not because of the color of the skin and not because of education. It really, was dressed along, and nationalism, national, boundaries and whatnot. And that was certainly very different from me. And what it helped me realize, when I came into the business pursuit is, it really does take a profound understanding, of all sides before you make any decision, because you really don't know the fabric or framework that was developed, prior to you meeting with them. Would you agree with that?
Oh yeah, it's really difficult to ever look at the world through any other lens other than you're the only one who's you. And the military really, really accentuated that. Everyone that was in your color uniform was your brother or your sister, and everyone who wasn't was a question mark. And you had to make sure that you understood that that was a question mark until you could undo the question mark. It wasn't a question of they were going to volunteer anything. And so that colors your world. I never got to the point where I ever feared for anything in particular, but I always understood that I needed to make sure that the person on my right was protected and someone on my left was going to protect me. And so you had the duality. You had the cultural relativity that everyone else was different and everyone else might be out to get you, but you also had a very, very big team on your side. So you do come away from the military with a very totally different perspective than any civilian could ever understand.
Yeah, and when you really, in a way, I like to quote Shakespeare when he says sometimes greatness is thrust upon you. When you go into something like the Marine Corps, what it really is you have diversity is thrust upon you, and then all of a sudden you have this diverse collection of differences all having to come together to create some type of unity, to accomplish a mission. And I think, like, for me, that's what makes it so odd to me when I look out, with entrepreneurs, or I look with business owners, or I look in family units, or I look in communities, and so much of what I see out there is so divisive in nature and not unifying, as in nature. And I think that's where you and I want to be change agents, because we want to show a different construct, a different performance, a different staging of what life can and should be like. And that's how I appreciate you, buddy. But we're coming on the end of the segment, and I want to make sure that we have enough time. How do we do that? How do we go over 20 minutes that quickly? But again, I'm with Buddy Thornton. Buddy Thornton is the owner and founder of BCT Mediations Plus. Meditations. Wow. He can be reached at 480-861-1371, or email him at buddypscapro@gmail.com. I want everyone to know that he is an author. He is a #1 world-class best-selling author. I'd like to say you're in this book. And he is also a speaker, a mediator, and what I love is a social change agent. So, buddy, we're going to come back to the next segment, and we're going to do a little bit of catch up and see what's going on, in the last few years of your life. Does that sound good?
It sounds fantastic.
All right. Thank you. All right, again, I'm with Buddy Thornton. He's an author, speaker, mediator, and social change agent, and he's the owner and founder of BCT Mediations Plus, not Meditations, right? Mediations Plus.
Right.
He can be reached at 480-861-1371, or you can email him at buddy, pscapro@gmail.com. And buddy, this is something I think you may laugh at, or you may not laugh at. I don't know. But one of the things that I found about in my life is people can be complicated, can't they?
That's why we're in business.
Even up to the point where people can be busy. When you throw family and you throw business and let alone community and even religion into the mix, you can get off course pretty quickly, can't you?
Yeah, I think the more you get involved in life, the more life takes a hold of you, and that's one of the reasons why I pivoted into where I am now, is because there's no such thing as a person who doesn't deal with conflict. And so, once I retired from being a professional bowler, I wanted to do something meaningful. And so that's why I became a mediator.
Yeah. And this is something I really strive to impress upon people, and is conflict doesn't, when we think of conflict, sometimes we may think of it as a physical thing, or maybe we think of it as a military engagement, but conflict takes all forms and sizes, doesn't it?
The most the most critical point about conflict is the conflict within yourself. We have a saying that no such thing as conflict that doesn't start within yourself. Tough conversations, they start within yourself. Before you get mad at somebody else, you have to examine what got you there, and you have to examine your contribution to what got you there. And until you learn how to do that, you don't know how to handle conflict. And I've had people who are peers who've said, the most challenging thing about getting a mediation to fruition, to the end, is convincing the parties before they even start negotiating that they have to really be aware of their own contribution. And a lot of people don't want to do that. They want to just keep blaming the other party. And so, yeah, conflict exists. It's universal. No one can avoid it. That's sad that a lot of them just bury it, or they don't know how to admit it. And that's one of the reasons why mediators sometimes don't get as much work as they'd like, is because people are like, oh no, I'm fine. I'm fine. How many times do you hear that?
Yeah, and so much of the time, mediation, actually gets you to the point of negotiation, and then that negotiation actually gets you to start to move forward, doesn't it?
The most important thing is, once you're at the table and you understand that there is a possibility that you could come to an agreement, it's a lot easier to move forward. The biggest problem is that a lot of people think, well, if you go to mediation, you're compromising, you're giving something away. And my answer is no. You have a position, the other people have a position, but you have a mutual interest. And the mutual interest is you want the conflict to go away. You want it to be handled properly. And sometimes when you just have no way to control that between you and the other party, you really need that third party neutral to step in and say, okay, look, let's take the long lens look. You look at this from his point of view, you look at this from her point of view. And now, after you've done that a little bit and thought about how each one of your pictures looks, let's talk about how we can make this big, beautiful Picasso come up out on the table. Truth in advertising, over the last 11 years, the analytics show that you get to a durable agreement about 70% of the time, and sometimes about 25% of the time. It's actually better to have no agreement at all. Sometimes it's better to walk away, but at least you've been heard. And that's the 100% factor, Robert. Everybody starts in conflict because they haven't been heard. Somebody's not listening to them. So
Right.
Once you can get them all listening, for some reason, the conflict, the air just kind of leaves the balloon and everyone's just talkative, and all of a sudden magic happens.
Yeah, and that's what's really fascinating to me, because at least in the sense that what I've seen, in the world that's around me, and I only can speak for me, is you have mediation and then you have litigation. And the thing is that you always say you try to start with mediation, then you get to litigation, but it's like, in most people's mind, they can see what litigation looks like in some shape, form, or fashion, but really, for people who've never gone into mediation, they don't want to go, because, quite frankly, to me, they don't have necessarily, eyes on what really mediation looks like and what it can do for them. Tell us a little bit about, what does, a little further, what can mediation possibly do for people? And I said negotiation earlier, and I said sometimes it's walking away from the table, but sometimes it's actually, not just being heard, but actually coming to agreements, and maybe coming into positions that benefit both parties in ways that they never would have come to on their own. Is that possible?
It is possible. When you look at litigation, what you're really looking at is one of two possibilities. One party is injured to the point where they can't survive unless they can get a quote unquote win, and they don't see any other process for getting a win. But that's a very small percentage of the time. The majority of the time, litigation is not about winning. It's about hurting the other party. You feel aggrieved or you feel hurt, so you want to hurt the other party. Well, mediation is exactly the opposite. In mediation, when you walk in the door, it's not about winning. It's about coming to some type of a mutual agreement and possibly saving a relationship that may be years in the making, that could go down the drain through a litigation, that could be saved and move forward over time. Mediation is definitely misunderstood, because most people think when they hear a mediator, they think right away, well, that's divorce. Okay, a lot of professional
Yeah.
mediators do divorce, but the high profile mediators like Lee Berman and other people like that, they don't do divorce mediation. They do corporate mediation. They get the big boys in a room and they say, okay, you need to play nice because you've got 100,000 shareholders, each of you, and you need to make sure that you come out of this, both of you, smelling really good. So let's just put away the swords and let's get out the talking sticks and let's pass it around and let's talk and everybody be heard, and then we move out. And that's true mediation. Divorce mediation
Yeah.
is, to me, that's more of a settlement type situation where especially in Arizona, once the D word has been uttered, it has to go through to fruition. A mediator can't say, no, I don't think you want to do that, because that would be a violation of ethics. You can't do that. But in all other types of conflict, the job of a mediator is, number one, take the air out of the balloon, and B, get the parties to realize that the best way to move forward is to at least come to some kind of an agreement, even if the agreement is to just not agree. And a
Yeah.
lot of people they don't see mediators that way.
Yeah, and that's why I really wanted to kind of bring this in and open it up a little bit, because when you hear mediation, you go right to family law, and that's why I wanted to bring up what does that look like for companies? What does that look like for partnerships? What does that look like for communities? Even cities. Even zoning. I mean, mediation, if done right, is a very I think well-purposed way, again, to get movement. And I think that that's what the best mediators do, is they get anything that needs to be accomplished moving again. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, we break a lot of concrete in our business. I guess is a good way to put it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Basically, a mediator is someone who has no vested interest in the outcome. But now let's take a look at a community conflict. Let's say two neighbors are having a boundary dispute and they need a mediator to help them get beyond their own egos or whatever they are seeing in the conflict. The mediator may have a vested interest in making sure that the community is kept at peace, but that also makes them a highly representative person for the social side, the third party invisible person in the room. Because sometimes when you're in conflict, you don't see anything but what's creating a problem for you in front of you, and you don't realize that everything you do is impacting the people around you. So
Right.
mediators have to take the position that not only are they serving the parties in the room, but they're serving the greater society. And really good mediators, and I would like to think my peers would call me a good mediator, always try to serve the greater good. I won't do that to harm a client, obviously, and we don't have individual clients in
Right.
mediation. Everyone in the room is a client, so you have to make sure that you harm nobody, but you still have to protect the greater good.
And it's really interesting, because I want to get into some other aspects of your life, buddy, because you really are well rounded, and but I really want to take some time on mediations, because I do feel we should have a whole show just on mediations, because I think it is very misunderstood. I think it's misapplied, and really a lot of people are missing out by not using good mediators to cross the finish lines in some purposes. But other places that you really have pushed in your life is pushing the ability of helping families out. It could be private parent coaching. It could be creating parenting classes. It could be and this might come from conflict in the home to just creating better aspirations, and even reasonableness from parents to children, or children to parents. Tell us a little bit about your life when it comes to helping the family dynamic, and what you do with that, with your coaching and your classes.
Well, when I got into mediation, I realized rather quickly that trying to fix conflict once it's engaged is far more difficult than creating a proactive environment where conflict is prevented,
Hmm.
which led me to wanting to get a life coaching certification so that I could actually work with parents and their teens. I work more with the parents than the kids, but I understand the kids. Well, I'm a great grandfather many times over already, and all my grandchildren are adults. So I've had a very good environment to learn similar to Piaget with his own kids when he did his research in the 1890s and early 1900s. And the truism is you have to take the family position. And a lot of mediators, the only time they touch the family is post-divorce when they're doing parent type work, or they're doing shared parenting agreements for the courts and things like that. Whereas I take the dynamic of let's eliminate the conflict between especially the adolescents and teens. And that's where I moved my life coaching. And with my doctoral work at Grand Canyon University, I met my friend Isaiah Drone III, who runs the podcast I'm on regularly. And he invited me to join his nonprofit, which is called Brokenness to Healing Foundation. And they mentor disadvantaged kids. They teach them leadership skills, and they help them basically become positive agents in the society themselves. And he's the one who actually gave me the label of Positive Social Change Agent Pro. He said, "You're so good with these kids. It's just amazing what you do." And when the parents, when they see what's happening, they're just, they are so excited. And I'm like, well, I think the label's going to stick. And it has. It's stuck for 10 years now. And it's very important to understand that if you don't work on the dynamic in the house, what I call the local before the global, if you can learn to fix every household, how much more peaceful would neighborhoods be? And if neighborhoods are peaceful, how much more peaceful would cities be? And so on until you go all the way out the top. I believe that it starts in the home, and it starts in between the parents and the kids. And I'm going to say this, and a lot of parents are going to not like me, but in my experience, about 90% of the problem is misdirected parents who are either having too many unpopular or untoward expectations of their children, or they just are not listening to their children. Once you fix the communication dynamic, everything falls into place. Everything.
Yeah, I mean, and it really does get, and when you have kids who are coming from two different homes, because both parents are splitting time, it can be even greater. I know I've been in that position myself before, and one of the things that I had to learn was, I was one of the tried to be the Uber dad, so I was maybe enabling too much, and then my son's mom, was kind of like maybe unable to do other things because of her work and health life. And, and then other parents, they disable, they were there and then they just disengage from their kids. And it's like, us parents, quite frankly, I kind of thought, well, my kid needs to correct so much of this. But, what I found in all the training that we learned in my life was, boy, I had to change some certain things. I had to create some different boundaries. I had to create some, different expectations, etc. And I truly believe, that 90% of where we place the blame should probably be on ourselves and not our kids. So I believe that. What are some tools that you use to actually bridge the communication back that kids and parents don't have? Where is that starting point? How do you ignite that?
Well, the first thing I do is I ask the parents, do they know exactly what their children's goals are? Do they really even have any clue about what their children like? And I'm not talking about what sports they like. I'm talking about, have you really dug into what their true interests are? If they were going to be alone on a desert island for the next 6 weeks, what would they want in their hands other than a video game? And parents look at you and they go, I'm supposed to know that? And it's like, yeah, actually, you need to be engaged with your children. Research shows that the average parent only spends 37 minutes a day quality time with a child. How much influence can you have over your child if you're only giving them 37 minutes of quality time? And I'm not talking about sitting watching TV. I'm talking about actually engaged face-to-face quality time. And that's an average. So if you consider that the average, what does the abysmal side look like? 0 or negative time? You're stealing time away from your kids, leaving them with other people because you don't want to deal with them. Parents need to understand that the number one thing that children want is they want parents who they believe are engaged in their life. It's called a quality world. And when the child sees that you're in their quality world, they're a lot more calm. They don't get into as much trouble. They communicate better. And by the way, you each actually know what their goals are. You know what their passions are. And when I was starting the Slippery Slope series, which we'll get into on another point, I focused very heavily on how kids perceive parents. And it's amazing when parents finally realize. I just ask them, I say, weren't you a teen at one time? Weren't you an adolescent at one time? How did you look? And then they'd go, oh, I never even think about that. I'm like, that might be your first clue.
Yeah, yeah. Other things that you talk about, and through some of your training is something called choice theory. And I know I look at back when I was a teen, I think I had to ascribe to my dad. It was called told theory. So I'm being told what my theory is going to be. But again, we've changed so much over the last few decades. And choice theory is something I don't necessarily understand myself, and maybe the listeners don't either, because that is very different than what, at least in my mind, I'm thinking that it is. And then the other thing is it would be, maybe once every 3 months or 6 months would I have any positivity come into my life on anything that I did. And I think in this day and age, maybe it's the media, maybe it's the kids, the general population, maybe it's just how we are as a society. Do we have power of choice? And can parents provide that positivity, for us and help us in our direction? And I just wanted you to comment on that a little bit, buddy.
Sure. I want to honor Dr. William Glasser because he's the inventor
Mm-hmm.
of choice theory, and he uses it in his psychiatric work with people who are obviously having mental issues and they need to be refocused on the world. But in short, choice theory is accepting that you only control what happens in your mind, your heart, your feelings, and your actions. That means that you cannot even control the dog at your feet, the other people in the room, and you should have no expectations that you can control them. You can hopefully role model positive behavior and influence them in some way, but you have no right to ever try to control them. Now, that goes against the grain for most parents. They look
Yeah.
at that, they go,
Mm-hmm.
whoa. So I have a theory called choice dynamics. Choice dynamics says, listen to your child, take into account how they see the world. You still want to have some control because you need to protect them, but you need to allow them to co-create their quality world, and you want to be in it, right? So if you
Mm-hmm.
make choices that make them comfortable and you give them space to grow, they're going to invite you into their quality world. And choice dynamics is how the parent and the child co-create an environment that is acceptable to both. And I go into a lot of detail in it in my books, but it's very important that people understand that choice theory says unequivocally, I don't control you. Long-term married partners is the biggest clue to choice theory. No parent or no wife, no husband controls the other. What they do is they co-create their existence and they move blissfully into their elderly years. And women and men who've been married 50, 60, 70 years will tell you, I never tried to control him. I just tried to be available to him or her. And that is the dynamic that I try to create in the family between the parents and the kids. And it is amazing. It's like night and day, Robert. When you take away that expectation and control, I call it the control monster. Put the control monster in the closet, leave it in the closet, hanging on a hook, and let's co-create our world. And if you have a question or you get frustrated with your child, take the time to listen to why they're doing what they're doing and take the time to ask instead of just coming to a conclusion. And that's how choice theory and choice dynamics actually work.
Wow, I really appreciate that, because I think we got to a deeper level of understanding on how that means, and I appreciate that, buddy. Again, I'm here with Buddy Thornton. He is an author, speaker, mediator, and social change agent. He's the owner and founder of BCT Mediations Plus, but I can tell just by our conversation, he is so much more than just mediations. But in a way, we're always being purposeful for getting one way or another. Whether it be a family, a business, a community, a country. And Buddy, and I think you have a really good handle on that. We're going to take a break, and we're going to come back in the next segment, and we're going to look at what's coming up on Buddy's horizon, because he has a fascinating slate of things that are coming out, and we're going to talk about that in about a minute and a second. Buddy, I'll see you right back here.
Okay.
All right. Again, I'm with Buddy Thornton. He's an author, speaker, mediator, social change agent, and owner and founder of BCT Mediations Plus. He can be reached at 480-861-1371 or email Buddy, pscapro@gmail.com. And Buddy, I'm glad you're still here with me. You're hanging in. We already went through 2 segments just like that. I can't even believe that. But one of the things I really wanted to talk about, and we talked about this before the show even started, is just for young entrepreneurs or people who may not be at the confidence level as us, and it's so simple to say, and I'm talking about putting yourself out there, and it really has a lot of meaning with me, because I was one of those people, and I was not one that really wanted to put myself out there. I felt like if I put my head down and I did a good job, the world would just give me a lot of reward. And I found out over time, maybe the reward, would be here, kind of like right in here. But quite frankly, I think that every person has so much to give, and we're born with so many gifts. I think it really is maybe self-serving and not selfless to let ourselves and our gifts be known to the world, because that's really how we create a better humanity, is by using the gifts that we have. Wouldn't you agree?
I would. I look at life through a very different lens, and I try to explain this to people when I coach them. You don't look for profit before you look for value. So I try to create value in everything, and I don't look for, nor do I expect profit on the backside. So like when I was hesitant about getting into networking or trying to approach people, I looked at myself and I said, you've got a lot of value to give. How are they going to know that if you're not willing to put yourself out there? So you have to have a little bit of vulnerability. You have to say, you know what? I'm going to put myself out there. If I stumble and I fall, I'm going to learn, if nothing else, and then I'm going to get up and I'm going to keep going. And so what if a few people laugh at me? I don't care, because at the end of the day, you're never going to satisfy 100% of the people, but you are going to reach those who actually need you. As has been mentioned before on your show, when the student is ready, the teacher shall appear. And in my world, I look at it this way. If I provide value and I give answers and I build a future and a level of self-confidence in people, then I'm going to be rewarded in kind for my work. And because I put the cart before the horse in that way, people see me from that lens as well. Occasionally, people try to take advantage of me a little bit. And because of my serving nature, I sometimes stumble a little bit in that area. And I'm very bad. I'm horrible at self-aggrandizement. So I have to have other people do that for me. So, you devalue yourself until you learn to interact with people. And once you learn to interact with people, you're fantastic. Yes, I had an early start. Dr. Kadingo was great. He used to have me walk into the room and go, hi, everybody, I'm Buddy Thornton. And this was when I was at 11, 12, 13 years old. So how could you have a better start than that, right? And it broke the ice, and hey, I'm going to be 70 in a couple of years, and hey, I'm still doing that. When I walk in the room, I want people to know I'm there, and hello, here I am.
Well, and I really think it's, quite funny because we met through LinkedIn, and I just, I tell my team, these are the people that I'm looking for, and they go out there and they find it. They find different attributes that are labeled through the LinkedIn profile, and then I set up appointments and I speak with people. And believe me, not all of them go well. A lot of them don't go so well. A few go, okay, but I remember getting to meet you and I thought, boy, this is a gentleman I'm going to keep. That's what I thought, but I said, I'm going to keep this guy because we had such a fascinating conversation. And I remember when you first, met me and, my personality and how I was coming across. And I knew that you were measuring me a little bit, am I who I am? And I remember I said, I am not asking for anything. I want to show you opportunity. We have this book. I want to, have you come to my community, just see the people that, I'm with. And then you came, and then you came again, and then you got a book, and then all of a sudden you came again. And I still remember the day you said, "Hey, Robert, I don't want to be a freeloader here, but do you have a membership for this group?" And I will never forget that. And I always appreciated that because very rarely do you have someone that says, you know what, I do see the value in what you did, you do, you're putting out there first and you're just like, look, I'm willing to put in because I get so much out of it. And I've always appreciated you for that, buddy. And it made me really feel good in its own way, you know, that you edified me, but you also showed that even what I do, facilitating and connecting and putting events together, there is a place for that too. And when you did that and you said that in what you do in your field, um, you know, it really created a feeling of that one moment of success. And so that's what you gave me right then and there. But speaking of success, you were just in Las Vegas, what is a month and a half ago, and you were sitting up on stage. You were holding, these plaques, and you're starting to be this, author rock star up there, and you won an award. Tell us a little bit about the award you just won.
Well, you mentioned Natalie McQueen. She is my
Yep.
publisher, and I went to Las Vegas with her to speak at a conference. And while I was at the conference, I was given the 2022 Taking Center Stage Author's Journey Educational Writing Award. And it's targeting my Slippery Slope series, specifically books 3 and 4, which are aimed at students and young adults, and the other book is the companion book for parents, teachers, and caregivers. And speaking of validation, I mean, I had no clue when I left that I was going to get an award, obviously, as they kind of brought that and surprised me with it. But the idea is that you serve people, and it's going to be recognized at some point if you do it right. And if you do it wrong, you'll know because no one will even know you're there. So that was very, very self-validating. But let me flip the coin on you a little bit here. I really enjoyed that in Vegas, but when I popped onto one of the social media sites and I saw your post saying, if nothing else, you have to know that Buddy Thornton is the real deal. To me, being real, being transparent, being honest, and even if I have to say something you're not going to like, I'm still going to say it. To
Yeah.
me, that means more than anything else. So, you certainly validated me and made me feel very affirmed when you did that. And I just looked at it and I said, well, Robert's kind of a tough cookie. So if he's willing to say it, then it has to be true.
Yeah, and I've learned, over time. I've been a computer programmer. I've did coding. I've worked a lot of different ways over the last several years, and it really is interesting how people and being front and center and getting on stage or getting on the radio show or being able to train in front of a crowd, it develops you differently. You have to develop a much broader personality set, this more dynamic skill set, because you can't just be hard, you can't just be soft, you can't just be loud, you can't just be quiet. You have to find, like, the stretching of a bag, this like magic place, in any audience or person that you meet with. And that's what I love about you, buddy, is you do that very well. And I'm excited about this Slippery Slope series, because what you do in this series is you're kind of in the same way. You're expanding the boundaries of what parents and families and society in general are seeking or seeing or wanting to achieve. Tell us a little bit more about the Slippery Slope series that you're doing with Natalie McQueen.
Well, the first two books, one is on ethics and one is on morals. And a lot of people think those are synonyms, but they're not. Ethics are how you treat other people appropriately, and morals are how you see the world and what is acceptable and unacceptable. And there's a very strong boundary between the two at that point. But you need to have a good moral worldview to be an ethical person. That's why people conjoin them. So they are cousins in a way. Books 3 and 4 obviously were education books. 5 through 12, because I've committed to doing a minimum of 12, and I may do more, but I'm going to do the 12, are all socially relevant books. One is on choice dynamics. Another one is on the 7 sins of how we make bad decisions. There's things that people don't really think about, but if they actually took the time to just kind of reframe the world they live in, it would change at least the demeanor that they approach other people with. And that's my job in my commitment to those 12 books, is to be a positive social change agent pro. The more people who get access to the books and read the books and come to my seminars and listen to my talks will understand that everything revolves around relationships and the one-on-one between people. And that's where it all has to start. And I don't leave anything out. The foreword of the second book, my committee chair wrote the foreword of my second book, and he says right in it, well, book 1 was somewhat controversial. You know what? If you have to be controversial to get a message out, that's what you have to be.
Yeah, that's what you have to be. And sometimes just having character is controversial. And that's what I love about you. You're both you have character and you are a character. So that's really good. But the other thing I think about it, and we have talked before. I love to have private counsel with you, and I tell you straight to you and you tell it to me. I'm a straight arrow. And I hear entrepreneurs, and they're always like, hey, but I have passion and I'm going to make this happen at all cost, and I'm going to do whatever it takes to get there. And quite frankly, when it comes to the moral compass or the ethics that you want to lead yourself with, I have a saying for that. I have a saying that says passion without principle is just criminal, because I don't lead my life that way. I don't lead my life at all costs. For me, it has to come with a certain amount, of principle, a certain amount of what is my character. And that's what leads me, buddy. I can have, passion, but I want to do it in a very proper and meaningful way, that fits within the guideline of my creator, in other aspects that I lead my life in. Which gets us to the last part of the show that I really want to get into. And speaking of life and speaking to legacy, you also have a Life and Legacy Academy that I believe that you're going to be doing this virtually, right? And maybe live. Tell us a little bit about the Life and Legacy Academy that you're going to be starting.
Well, I looked for a couple of years to find a partner who would be on the technical side of doing things, because I wanted to take all of my created courses, and I have 21 created courses for the social side, and I have a multitude of courses for the business side as well. I do obviously do business negotiations and mediation. And I wanted to move all those to the virtual space because A, because of COVID, and because B, we don't really know how the world is going to work. But when you go and you speak in front of a group, you're limited to the number of people in the seats. When you go to speak at an event, and even if it's televised, you're still limited to the people who are going to either tape it or see it live. But if you have an online platform and you have books, published items, those are eternal. They can be on for over a long time. Plus, the online platform allows you to build something and then let it run, and you see it generate. You do the analytics, and if something isn't resonating, or you get feedback from people saying, hey, you need to think about this, you can pivot and you can change it. It's the best way in the world to get instant feedback from your followers about whether your message is resonating with them or not. If you're going to be a positive social change agent pro, you need to be listening to the people who are on the other side of that equation.
Yeah.
And yes,
Yeah.
Life and Legacy Academy is going to be opening shortly. We just got approved by the state of Arizona, and it's going to have all the courses, and we're going to invite other people who are socially relevant course creators to come on the platform and host with us so that we can resonate and we can start building a much better, stronger society. That's our goal, that's our intent, and that's our mission statement.
Well, you have the backing of me and our community Mind Entrepreneur Network, buddy. It's all what it's about. And I say, let's start with our kids and let's get them the proper tools, the proper direction, and the proper people to lead them. And we're going to be in safe hands. Again, I am with Buddy Thornton. He is an author, speaker, mediator, and social change agent, owner and founder of BCT Mediations Plus. I cannot wait to see his Slippery Slope series, and hopefully get to be there with him with his Life and Legacy Academy. Again, Buddy, thank you so much for being on the show today, giving us so many, I call them pop rocks of learning, and I hope you had a great time and that you have a great week.
It was an honor, Robert. And anytime you need anything, please reach out. And that goes for all of your audience as well.
Thank you. All right. Again, I was with Buddy Thornton. How fast does that hour pass? Again, we are here from 2:30 to 3:30 Arizona time, which right now is the same time as Los Angeles and San Diego. I want to thank everyone for being here today. And until next week, 2:30 to 3:30, I will see you then, and let's have some fun.
You've been watching the Iron Entrepreneur Show, a production of the Iron Entrepreneur Radio Network, with host Robert W. Jones. Join Robert each week as he visits with new and exciting guests who inspire, teach, and mentor entrepreneurs worldwide. Follow Robert each Thursday at 1:30 p.m. Pacific, 4:30 p.m. Eastern, and 8:30 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time.